Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Hello, my brother. Well, if you're like me, your biggest fear is not living out your fullest potential, and instead living out the definition of hell, which we've talked about many times on this show. The definition of hell is, at the end of your life, the man that you became meets the man that you could have become. The one thing standing in the way of you living out your fullest potential is fear. And today's guest, Ben Aldridge, shares his story of how crippling anxiety and panic attacks that came out of absolutely nowhere threatened to derail his life until he decided to take command. He designed what he calls the year of adversity, which is where he began to learn how to befriend and face his fears through the tackling of 43 challenges that he designed himself that shattered his self-imposed limitations and blew the ceiling off of what he previously thought his potential to be. And he's here to help you do the same. Ben went from living a safe, small, uninspiring life to becoming like the real life version of Jason Bourne. So who is Ben Aldridge? Well, during Ben's year of adversity, he learned how to pick locks, solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, memorize a deck of cards after seeing it only once. He's taken ice baths and swam in the British Sea during winter. He's eaten repulsive insects and learned how to have a conversation in Japanese, all within 1 year. Ben is now the author of How to Be Comfortable Being Uncomfortable, 43 Weird and Wonderful Ways to Build a Strong and Resilient Mindset. Ben is a full-time guitar teacher, and he executed these 43 challenges in his spare time. Hell, during quarantine, Ben has already climbed the equivalent of Mount Everest in his apartment staircase, which took over 2,000 trips up and down. And he ran a backyard marathon in his 26-foot-long garden, which took him over 4,000 shuttles, right? So this guy is living his cooking every single day. So in this episode, you're going to learn how to listen to your fear and anxiety and allow it to direct you to deepen your strength and courage versus clinging to safety and comfort. Ben is going to share with you how the philosophies of Stoicism, Buddhism, cognitive behavior therapy, and fixed growth mindsets were essential to him having the tools necessary, the foundation necessary to execute on these 43 challenges. Ben will go through his process of how he brainstormed and ultimately chose the 43 challenges. He will teach you how to brainstorm and design your own challenges so that you can unlock your fullest potential, and why your anti-bucket list is a great place to start with designing your challenges. So please enjoy today's episode of Find Your Potential Through These 43 Challenges featuring Ben Aldridge. You know, Ben, you've got 43 challenges in your new book, How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable, but one of them is not breath work. And Brian just led us through a little off the air Wim Hof breathing. So how are you feeling right now, brother?
Oh, great. Actually, that was a lovely way to start a podcast. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, really, really good feeling now. Good vibe.
I know that you are a Wim Hof fan. You've been doing cold showers and you've been doing ice baths, but we want to convert you into the breath work. So if we have any ability to influence what your next 43 challenges are, we would love to put breath work up there as one of them.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I've really enjoyed doing a lot of the Wim Hof stuff, but as I was saying earlier, I haven't actually committed to a lot of the breath work yet. But I've been doing cold showers every day and taking it a bit further with the ice bars. And I've actually been swimming in an ice lake, frozen lake in Finland, and that was quite an experience. That was kind of taking it to the next level, really.
I think one of your next challenges should be impersonating Wim Hof while you do all those things, because that guy is such a character. I feel like he's somebody that could be a character in every single sketch of Saturday Night Live and fit in. Yeah. Such a character.
That, climbing Kilimanjaro in your underpants, in your boxers, that's just brilliant, isn't it? He's quite a character.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's larger than life, man. And Ben, we're going to get into all the details of why you're doing such crazy stuff and what it's like to swim in an Arctic lake in Finland. But let's set some of the context first, man. I mean, you've just written a book. It's going to be coming out in June called How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable. After embarking upon what you called the year of adversity. And in that year, you took upon 43 challenges that many of which I've done myself, many of which I don't think I would want to take on. And so I think Brian and I and our listeners want to know what prompted this year of adversity.
So, yeah, great question. This whole project has really been my response to severe and debilitating anxiety. So, seemingly out of the blue, a few years ago, I was hit with this terrible, terrible anxiety, and I didn't know anything about mental health at the time. I didn't know anything about anxiety. This really caught me off guard. And this whole method of challenging myself has actually been my way of responding to this and helping me to essentially build mental strength to deal with this situation. And that's where this has all come from. So it's been quite an adventurous year or so, but yeah, it's been amazing transformation. My life has completely changed.
Ben, take us through that, because there's a lot of people deal with anxiety. What they don't do is jump into a 43 challenges over a 1 year period in wildly different ways. So what was it? You went from not knowing anything about mental health and anxiety taking over to how did you get to here?
Yeah, so basically what happened, I had this moment of sheer just terror, and I started having panic attacks, and I didn't think that it was my mind. So I went to the doctor to try and understand more about what was happening. And she instantly recognized it as panic and anxiety attacks. So I had to kind of educate myself on what was happening, and I needed a bit of space to do that. So I started reading and consuming all of this material. And this is ultimately what changed my life, because I discovered loads of ideas and loads of things that really resonated with me. And the core idea that really jumped out at me was found within Stoic philosophy. So I was doing a lot of reading, and I came across the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome. And they had this concept, which I absolutely loved. The basic principle is they practice adversity to become stronger. So they deliberately leave their comfort zones in order to build mental strength. And I just loved it. I love the Rocky movies. There's a training montage. And I don't know why, I just thought I can kind of resonate with this. I can picture a training montage where I try and actually train my mind by doing all of these kind of things. And the Stoics, they used to do this. They used to expose themselves to the cold and the heat, and they would sleep on the floor on hard surfaces so that they could practice tough conditions to train themselves. So that was really my inspiration. I kind of took this idea and, brought it to the modern world, I guess, and started doing it and living it. And it's had a huge effect on my life.
Yeah. Stoic philosophy, I know, has had a lot of influence and impact over, say, Tim Ferriss's life. I remember reading about the concept of practicing poverty to overcome the fear of being impoverished. And one of those exercises would be, for a week, you have to live off of $20, right? And that has to make all of your meals and anything that you need to get done. You sleep on the floor without a pillow. I know this is one of the challenges, one of the 43 challenges that you've done, and I want to talk about that in a few moments. And I think to provide some deeper context, Ben, about the anxiety that you are experiencing, many of our listeners either experience anxiety in a conscious way or experience anxiety in an unconscious way. I know one of my dearest friends and just ideal clients who I worked with last year, her name is Terry Kelly. She's a senior vice president of Morgan Stanley, completed 5 Ironman competitions. She's a top 10 wealth advisor in the state of Arizona, as ranked by Forbes, women wealth advisors, and a mother and a wife. And she's 40 something, early 40s. So superwoman. She came to me because exactly what you describe in your book was she had a massive panic attack, which she mistook for a heart attack. 6 paramedics raced to her house, and she was carried out on a stretcher and went to an ambulance. And she had that wake-up call that this anxiety that she had been, kind of suppressing and burying in the name of high performance eventually screamed to the surface. And I know in working with a lot of men tell me these stories about how when they're driving on the, about to go over a bridge, they need to pull over to the side of the road. I've had 5 male clients tell me that before they've driven onto a bridge, they've had to pull over, or after driving over a bridge, because of a panic attack. It kind of just comes up out of nowhere. So for you, can you just dive a little deeper into like how this came up out of nowhere for you on your trip to the United States and like what you thought was happening when it was going down?
Yeah, it's a great question. It sounds like, very similar to your friend. I think for me, I thought I was having a heart attack the first time, and like it just felt, and then it eventually passed, and I didn't know what was going on. It was very confusing, and this comes down to bad education on mental health. So I didn't know what was happening, and I was doing a road trip with my girlfriend at the time. We'd landed in San Francisco, and we were going to drive down to LA and across to Vegas, and I really honestly don't know why at that point, but suddenly it just hit me. I thought it was jet lag. I got off the plane and I just felt horrific. And I just started having these panic attacks. And at the time, I didn't know they were panic attacks. So that's just very terrifying when you don't know what it is. And I was convinced I'd like pick something up on the plane. And why am I shaking? Why do I feel like I'm going to throw up? Okay, maybe, I've got something I caught something on the plane on the flight over. But it didn't ever go. And I just had this kind of fear, this underlying fear that was just there constantly. So it really came out of nowhere. I didn't understand what was happening. So over the course of that road trip, I just kept on having these, experiences that just got worse and worse, and then ended up in Vegas, not wanting to leave the hotel, which is not really what you want to do when you're in Vegas. You've got this vision about, going to Vegas, and then in just a terrible, terrible place.
I mean, don't feel too bad about this, Ben. Vegas gives a lot of people anxiety just for many different reasons. What was going on? So Dominic's story talked about all the things in his client's life that would put pressure. Was there anything going on in your life? And did you have any tools at that point of how did you deal with the Sunday scaries or the stress that was in your life?
Absolutely zero tools. I had nothing in my tool belt. And it just came out of nowhere. There wasn't something in my life that happened to cause it. It came out of nowhere. I had a great job, an amazing family, friends, and a girlfriend is incredible. And I have no reason on paper to be anxious. It just came out of nowhere. And that's the thing. There was I couldn't find a trigger. And it was just, I guess, a cumulative stress and not being able to deal with things, not any kind of pressure. And, it just built up over time. And then suddenly when that sort of snowballed, I didn't have anything in place to deal with it. And and I was so ill-educated as well, which made it worse. Because when you don't know what you're facing, that's when it's so scary.
As most men don't have the tools, the tools that we go to, alcohol, porn, emotional eating, gambling, or throwing ourselves deeper into work to like ignore and suppress those feelings. And what's interesting, I'm going to read you something that I wrote, and I referenced this in one of the other podcasts. And Brian, like you called this out the other day about something like how this came off so powerfully for you. Let me just read it, and then I'll share with you why I think it's important as context right now. Cursed is the man with the ability to ration out his quiet desperation and subtle torment to the degree where he can endure it over the course of a lifetime where very little changes. Fortunate is the man who is shaken awake so completely and thoroughly that he has no choice but to make the changes that he's been dreaming about. And victorious is the man who lives a life of his own design, courageously embarking on the journey of living the great man within. Now, when I think about cursed, I think about how Ben could have ended up if he didn't have these panic attacks. If you weren't waking up, you never would have had the gift of going on this journey. And I look at you as being fortunate, the man who was shaken awake so completely and thoroughly that he had no choice, right, but to address and make some of these changes. And now I look at you as the man who is victorious, because like you are consciously designing a future that you can't wait to live into. Like you're discovering and living the great man inside of you. And so can you speak for a moment about how you feel when you reflect upon those moments of torment, of pain and discomfort, and how you feel about that as Ben today?
Yeah, but brilliant question. And hindsight is obviously, changes everything. And actually something that was initially negative and terrible at the time, it was the worst thing that could have happened to me. And I look back on it, and it is by far the greatest thing that's happened to me, because it's really enabled me to completely change my life. And it's taught me so much about myself. So actually this pain and this terrible place has made such a difference in a positive way. You don't know what's happening at the time, and you think that your life is going to go in one direction. It seems like it's very negative, but actually for me, this became that catalyst, exactly what you were talking about. It gave me this, purpose to move into a different space, a different direction. And I've learned so much about myself, and the journey's been incredible. And I look back and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. I wouldn't be doing all of these things, and I wouldn't be living so adventurously. And so I'm really grateful for that. It's these weaknesses that actually give us so much richness to our existence. And it's hindsight that we can see that. It's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it, though, isn't it? That's the thing.
It's often you say that these weaknesses are like the indicators or the signals. And I know for a really long period of my life, those were the things I would avoid. I wouldn't want to address them. I wouldn't even want to look at them. And you've taken this idea of anxiety and something that men may shy away from or feels like a weakness, and said it's not a weakness, it's just a signal. It's something that I can do and now make a choice with. And with that, I would love, Dominic, to jump into, okay, so you read a bunch of books, you learned what they had to say about it in Stoicism, and I think there's a couple other inputs, and then you started this wild journey over a 1-year period.
Yeah, I'm looking at what you wrote in your book. You said, I ran marathons. I climbed mountains. I walked over 100 miles in 4 days. You can now have a conversation in Japanese. You've learned how to pick locks, solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, memorize the order of a deck of cards after only seeing it once, swimming in the British Sea in winter, taking ice baths, and you've eaten some repulsive insects along the way, right? We want to dive into some of these and like, why the fuck? Yeah. And then I think the first place is like, how did you pick these challenges and why did you choose these particular ones?
Yeah. So, as I was saying about the Stoic kind of inspiration, they used to do a lot of things, a lot of crazy things. Cato, one of the not so famous Stoics, would deliberately dress like an idiot. He could practice being embarrassed in front of his peers. So all of these things kind of inspired me. I thought, okay, that's very, that's easy. I'm an introvert. So if I dress like an idiot, or if I do something embarrassing, that's really hard for me. So that's a great challenge. It's very easy to visualize that. You put a stupid hat on, you walk down Oxford Street, which is, the main street in central London, and there's thousands of people. And if you're an introvert, you're going to find that embarrassing. And it's that, I love that idea. So there's a lot of things that I just took straight from Stoicism. Cold exposure, things like that, sleeping on the floor and practicing going without, so fasting from food and water. But that was kind of, I took it, directly from Stoicism, but then I had these different categories. And I guess that was the way to create this list. I wanted to leave my comfort zone in as many different ways as possible. So I divided them into different categories: physical, mental, and skill-based. We've all got different shaped comfort zones. So the idea is to try and leave it in as many different ways as possible, because the more you do that, the bigger your comfort zone gets and it expands. So really all of these challenges have to be diverse to allow me to do that. If it was just one area, then of course, you can drill down on your, leave your physical comfort zone, but there's so much more than that. And that's what I've tried to do with a lot of these challenges, to try and push myself in different ways.
Give us some insight. So we've got skill, we've got physical, and we've got mental, right? Those are the three categories of the challenges that you did. One of the, I think it was maybe number 2 or 3, but it was to learn Japanese. And when I read that, I was like, wow, like, one, where did this come from? But 2, I was having a conversation recently with someone about wanting to develop a new skill. And there was the desire to do the skill, and the skill was play guitar. But they said, I don't know if I want to commit to the time that it's going to take to actually be good enough to enjoy doing it. Like there is some sort of commitment that needs to happen there. And it's like, how do I fit that in with everything else? Not sure if I actually want to do that. Did you speak any other languages before this besides the primary language?
No, I didn't.
Right. So this is your first foreign language that you decided to learn. So talk us through just like that one and use that as a case study for us.
Okay, so that's interesting. That's an epic challenge. So there's within the year, I did different types of challenges. Some were very quick and some were very committing. Learning a foreign language is pretty much as committing as you can get for any of the challenges. So that's quite an extreme example. But again, this is this variety that pushes you out of your comfort zone. So you can have short things that are easy to do, but also the commitment needed. That takes a lot of mental strength to kind of commit to something. So naturally, within the skill category, learning another language, that can be very life-changing. And it's a great way to push yourself out of your intellectual and academic comfort zone. If you want to talk about practicing adversity, just open a Japanese textbook. I mean, it's so complicated. It's so, it's very foreign. If you're an English speaker, it's the hardest language to learn. So it's got adversity written all over it. But at the same time, I kind of fallen in love with Japan. I'd been a few times, and naturally this just felt like it would be, the perfect challenge. I can get closer to another culture. I can learn. And actually at the same time, I get to practice all of this philosophy that I've been studying and this kind of mindset. My mindset had been changing slowly. And actually this was going to help, committing to something and sticking with it.
As I hear you talking about this commitment, the anxiety that comes up in me about opening up a Japanese textbook is extreme. And what were you doing during this time? I think this is important context for everybody listening to your story. What were you doing during this time, during this 1 year? Did you have a job? Did you have other responsibilities? How did you fit all this stuff in?
Yeah, so that's good. And that's why not all of the challenges are as, time consuming as learning Japanese. Otherwise the book would be, you just wouldn't be able to do it. It would be too much. So there were a few things that were very committing, and they became kind of like a daily ritual. They were part of the things I would do every day. But I worked. I'm a teacher. I'm a guitar teacher. I teach in schools all week. And I do get some downtime in the holidays, but I use that for projects and writing now. And actually at the time, I was using it to do a lot of the challenges. But really, I had to fit it in a very busy life. So I would get up early to do a lot of these challenges and committed to, alpine starts, getting up at like 4 or half 4. And, there's some days a bit later, like 5, and just getting into that, early start and getting stuff done before going to work. And the change was so important. I really wanted to make this change. I made time for it. Every weekend I could get away and go on an adventure and tackle some challenges. I would take that opportunity, and I would have to get up early as well to do it. So I really tried to squeeze it in where possible.
Yeah, Brian, what Ben is reminding me of is when we did the interview with Scott Young, who wrote the book Ultra Learning, right? And ultra learning, like the key premise there was like learning how you learn. Most of what he talked about were like these massive tasks in a short period of time. Like I think his claim to fame was taking the MIT 4-year program and doing it in like 1 year self-study and kind of just like putting everything else off to the side. What I really love about what Ben has done is in 1 year, while maintaining a full-time job, is you've been able to implement or execute 43 different challenges that you have categorized in the book in those 3 categories of physical, mental, skill, but also you've given them hardship ratings, challenge level ratings, commitment level ratings. I think that that's quite useful in delineating like how much time do I have for these things? Because many of our listeners are married with kids, right? And my understanding is you're a man who's in a committed relationship, but you don't have children. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. And I want to make sure that we always bring that into the conversation because some of our listeners can get like, I can't do 43. I'm juggling, spinning all these plates. But there are plenty of ideas in your book that require 5 minutes a day of investment, or can be filled in the cracks of commuting, getting creative around these things. So whoever you are, however you're listening, don't necessarily need to do 43 challenges in this next year, but listen for like what things Ben has done that you can implement right now in your lifestyle.
Ben, can you say in Japanese, Dominic, you're a beautiful human?
Dominic-san wa kirei desu.
There it is.
I don't know if you did it, but it sounds great.
It sounded sexy. I like that.
All right, man. I want to dive deep into like some of these challenges themselves. But before we do that, one of the things I really like that you did in the book is you went and told the golden rule of Stoicism, the golden rule of Buddhism, the golden rule of cognitive behavioral therapy. Can you go through some of those? Because those were the pillars for you in your education as you learned about anxiety and then taking on these challenges and stepping outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's great. A great question. But yeah, so a lot of the challenges, you need to have some tools in place to do them, because especially when you push yourself out of your comfort zone, when you start doing things that are actually scary, you kind of need some system to fall back on. You need some ideas that are going to help you. Now, obviously, different people are going to resonate with different ideas. For me, there are a couple of things that really, really helped me. The first was the idea of a growth mindset. The second were some of the ideas found within Buddhism. Now, I'm not a Buddhist, but I think there's a lot of really practical ideas within Buddhism that can really help people. And then the third concept that really, really resonated with me were, well, those ideas within Stoicism. And you could probably guess that because I've been talking about Stoicism already. But yeah, Stoicism was very helpful. Lots of these ideas were great for me because they allowed me to, well, when I started getting outside my comfort zone, I could rely on them. I could test them out. And the ones that really, really helped, they stuck. And this is what I write about. So there's lots of different things. I think the first one, growth mindset, that's massive. So have you read Mindset by Carol Dweck? Do you know the book?
Yes.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yep.
So the concept that there are two types of mindset. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Fixed mindset is ultimately very negative, and when things go wrong, well, that's an indication you're probably doing the wrong thing. If you fail, well, you should give up. If you suck at tennis, well, you're not going to get better. So it's quite negative. And I definitely had that when I was very anxious. I was very fixed, and, I could see that my world was very limited.
Yeah, the fixed mindset, Ben, is this belief that our skills are fixed from an early age, right? It's either like I'm a good singer or I'm not, or I'm an artist or I'm not. And I remember having that fixed mindset around my own artwork. I'm in my mind, I'm a terrible artist. I have no artistic ability. That is my fixed mindset around that. And then in the book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, she took people who believe that about their artistic abilities, and then they showed pictures of drawing self-portraits. And with a few moments of training, I think it was 30 minutes of training, they took someone who went from drawing stick figures to drawing something that would be not embarrassing, in terms of a portrait, a self-portrait. And I was like, holy shit, this applies to all areas of our lives where we actually can have a dramatic ability to change our abilities, how we navigate our emotions and these kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. That's the fixed mindset. And it applies to many different areas. And we can, of course, have fixed mindsets for certain areas in our lives. And the opposite is growth. It's looking for, it doesn't matter if you fail. Actually, if you're failing, it's good because it's teaching you a lesson. And this was huge for me. This kind of, okay, I've started experiencing all of these negative things, what I perceived to be negative at the time, this anxiety. As soon as I reframed it and started to think about, actually, what can I learn from it? What is this teaching me about myself? And viewing it, not from a fixed mindset of, I've broken my mind, I'm not going to get better, to how can I learn? What can I do about this? What can I learn about myself? Everything changed. So this concept's so powerful. It's amazing. I love that book so much. And I have to credit that to, having a huge impact on my life as well. And also with the skills that I've been learning Japanese as well. You have to have a growth mindset because you're constantly failing. So you need to look at, okay, focus on what you can do, what you've learned. That's been really helpful. The skills category in my book and all of these different skills challenges really test that. They test your patience. It's a good attitude to cultivate. I think it can be very empowering.
On this fixed mindset concept, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert can also, in my mind, be perceived as either fixed. Because I've seen a lot of people just say I can never do that because I'm an introvert. But you had an opportunity to challenge that where it's man, calling attention to myself by dressing like an idiot and walking down Oxford Street. I remember Tim Ferriss when he talked about this. It was walk into Starbucks, lay down on the ground and do snow angels and just feel the shame and humiliation around that and then get up. And I look at how many people limit their lives because it's oh, I'm an introvert, I could never do that. Or I'm an extrovert, so it needs to be this way. Have you found that to be something that has expanded your own definition of being introverted as you've gone through these challenges and challenged that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is, again, that's a kind of, we identify with things I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. And I think there are certain, we all have characteristics, but we can challenge them, we can push them. And actually you can build challenges around who you are. For me, one of the things in the book was to, start putting myself in situations where I would kind of actively talk to random people. I would go out there to do that, to build confidence. And that's not going to be a big challenge for someone who would consider themselves an extrovert and they talk to everyone all the time. So that's a very personal challenge. I think it's important to challenge these things and these ideas. And actually we can learn a lot. And another book, which is amazing, Quiet by Susan Cain. Love that book. And that's talking about this, the introvert-extrovert dynamic. And actually, we're a little bit of both, actually, and we can slide along a scale depending upon the situation.
Ben, can you give us your process on selecting some of these? And I like this example of go talk to a stranger, right? For somebody like me, I do that for fun. I'll go to the park and talk to a stranger. But for you, that really resonated with you somehow. What was your process to get to these example challenges of ones you didn't read about in a book? Did you brainstorm it? Did you rate them? Did you just decide to do it one day? What was that process like for you to decide what to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I basically just did, I sat down with a piece of paper and the ideas just kind of came out. I just started writing down hundreds of things. My first book was going to be 365 challenges. It was a bit too intense. So I had to cut back quite a lot of them. So, and then I can spend more time on each challenge. But it was just a list. It just came out, like categorizing them helped. Having physical challenges, it's easier to think, okay, physical things, what can I do? You start listing all of these things. Skill-based challenges, you start, and it's just kind of playing around and you end up with a massive list. And it's interesting because we all know the bucket list, right? The idea of a bucket list, all these things we want to do. I love the idea of an anti-bucket list, which is what I kind of did when I was creating these challenges. It's things you don't want to do. That actually, if you do them, you're going to grow.
I love it.
So that kind of helped me. And there are things that made it on the list that I was like, I really don't want to do that. But actually, if I do it, it's going to help me. And I've got all these tools that I've been learning, been reading about, and this will be really helpful if I can get through this. So yeah, it's kind of throwing all these ideas onto the page and very personal to me because obviously we're all different. Our comfort zones look different. So it's, that was just playing around with that. And that was fun. That was really fun. And, you've got some of these things on the list and you're like, should I? That's so scary for me. But actually going through it, and when you do it, you get this boost in confidence.
What was one of those scary ones that you were like, I don't want to do this?
Okay, needles. I have a massive fear of needles. So naturally, the last thing I would want to do is go and have acupuncture. That was it. That was the challenge, to go and have acupuncture. Get needles in your face, your stomach, your legs, in between your toes, and all over your body. And actually doing that was amazing because now I don't have that intense fear of needles. I went to loads of different acupuncture sessions and it was that kind of being afraid, but leaning into it anyway and just learning about myself through experience.
But one of the reasons I like this is it's a really practical application of something that Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, and he's written a few other things, and he talks about how when we have some sort of fear, we tend to just cover it up and we can build our entire lives around that. And he likens it to having a thorn in your arm. Instead of figuring out how to deal with the thorn and take it out, we decided to put a bandage around it. But then we hit a wall too hard and it hurt, so we put a bigger bandage around it. And then we decided this is a good idea, and we decided to sell bandages to other people so they can put it on their arms that they have thorns. And we start to build an entire business of creating protection around this thorn in our arm, And what you're talking about here in this needle one is really a tangible one. How do I really address it? How do I face it so I don't need the bandage so I can walk around and hit walls all day long without any kind of pain? And I love that. It's such it feels like an empowering way to go about doing this.
Yeah, it's so different for everyone. Because some people, they'll be listening to this and thinking, well, I have acupuncture every week and I never had a problem with it. So, of course, it's going to be different, but it's finding what will personally, terrify you and push you. Like for you guys, okay, here's an example. What about you guys? What would really, really challenge you? What kind of heights, or is there something, insects, or what kind of things?
Terrify? Like that way, terrify? So the way I was going to answer your question, Ben, and tell me if this is not where you were going, but in your book, you talk about fasting, right? I've done a 24-hour fast, but I'm actually about to embark upon a 5-day fast. And I bought this kit because there's been a lot of research that has shown that over a 5-day period, you can still have some caloric intake and get all of the same benefits of a 5-day fast as you would if you were to do just like a water-only fast. Okay. And so it's like a far less intrusive or like painful experience. So I bought this program from Prolon, Prolon, that gives you like a certain amount of calories per day. And I learned about it by watching Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop Netflix special where she did the 5 days. And they tested her, like her telomere length on day 1 and day 5. Long story short, it was basically like you have a chronological age and a biological age. Chronological age is basically like exactly how old you are based on your birthday. I was born on November 7th, 1978. I'm 41 years of age. But your biological age is basically like looking at all the cells in your body And based on how healthy you are, you're either going to be like younger than your chronological age or older. And they tested 3 different types of approaches. It was a 5-day fast for Gwyneth. And the 2 other women had like a 30-day vegan diet. And another woman had a 30-day Mediterranean diet. And the one who reduced her biological age the most was Gwyneth, doing the 5-day fast using this Prolon kit. So I went and bought it. It's like a $200 kit. And I think it's sourced by, it's like the University of either California or I forget, Stanford's longevity study group. So it's pretty reputable, but it scares me to think about 5 days of being headachy, body aching, not at my optimal performance, having to do work like this, and to deliver webinars or keynote speeches and not be at my best. That scares me. And I've never done that before.
The symptoms of this, Dominic, sound a lot like coronavirus. So just saying, the timing of this, Dominic, is a little off.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real challenge, isn't it? 5 days without food. That's going to be really tough.
Yeah, that's scary. What about you, Brian? Like, what's your thing that scares you?
When Ben asked that question, I was like, my mind immediately was like, I'm not scared of anything, right? And we all know that's complete bullshit. But at the same time, I can't come up with something on the spot. I think I need to go through that process that Ben went through and start to write some of these things down. What I find my mind doing as I'm just thinking about this is finding the why nots. Like, well, I can't do this because I don't have time for this. I've got other commitments to do that. And so I think the categorization that Ben went through in terms of physical, mental, skill, and then how hard, was it epic or was it over a 1-hour period? I think that's going to be really helpful for me to sit down and work through my anti-bucket list and my bucket list and categorize those things, because I don't know.
But you've done this stuff before, like when we've done the 30-day no porn challenge, or like, the 30-day no masturbation challenge, or like for me, I did 50 days of no television or Netflix or YouTube, 100 days of no alcohol. Like, you've done these challenges before and they haven't been comfortable.
Yeah, but those don't scare me at all anymore. Like those, I could take on those with no problem whatsoever, including the 30 days of no cookies. I could do that. But I've already done it, So I want something that gives me a little sense of fear, a little sense of like,
spice, yeah.
Okay, I've got one for you. And Ben, this is not in your book either, and this is something that we're going to enroll you in. We're going to do the 100 push-up challenge. Okay? Everyone in our mastermind is going to be doing this. This is just a heads up for you, Brian. Everyone in the mastermind over a 90-day period is going to be doing the 100 push-up challenge, which for anyone who's done the 100 consecutive push-up challenge, you understand that it has very little to do with the push-ups themselves, right? Like, and what I can guarantee for any man who wants to go through the 100 push-up challenge, the way that I'm going to be leading it, I can guarantee you 2 things. Number 1, you're going to do more push-ups than you ever thought possible. And number 2, at the end of the process, you are going to discover that you are a much more capable man than you ever thought possible. And I'm going to be developing this program that we're going to be launching for like all of our audience, all of our listeners at some point in the very near future. But what the 100 push-up challenge does, and this is just in alignment with everything that you talk about in your book, it's not just a physical exercise. It's masquerading as a physical exercise, but there's a lot of stuff in there around what's going on in your mindset. What's that voice in your head? How are you training? Do you know where your edge is so that like you can push right up to that edge without straining or hurting yourself? Because most guys, when we go after challenges, and I'd actually like for you to talk about this, Ben, as guys, when we put these challenges up, and I know you say that you're strict with yourself in the book, we kind of do it with blinders on, and then we either injure ourselves in the process or we let plates drop in other areas of our lives because we're so focused that we ignore our kids, we ignore our loved ones, we ignore our work, or we ignore our long-term well-being because we're burning ourselves into the ground. So I'd love to know from you, from all of these experiences, did you feel like that you did a pretty good job managing, like doing the challenges, but not wearing yourself down into a nub or ignoring your girlfriend or, the other most important areas of your life?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question because, it's obviously difficult. When I kind of got on this path where I was just, doing all of these challenges, and it felt like I had to do them because I wanted to make this change. So it became a priority for me to just continually push myself. And I learned a lot when I was doing that, because actually some of the physical challenges, you do have to be careful. Like, for instance, running a marathon, I'd never run one before. So this was a big one. This was obviously difficult. And I was just a little bit too over enthusiastic when I first started. And naturally you end up, I injured myself. And then I had to kind of give myself a bit of space and, actually think about what I was doing and not go too hard with that. And, learn how to stretch and balance and do all these other things. So although you can end up injuring yourself or going at things too hard, if you're perceptive enough, you're going to get a lesson from that anyway. So you can, as long as you're learning from that, then it doesn't really matter. Okay, I injured myself when I was training for my marathon. What did it teach me? That's the key thing. So actually listening to that, the next marathon I ran, I didn't get injured. And then the next one I didn't. So it kind of snowballs. So actually these things that initially seem like, okay, maybe that's a problem, could be a guide to how you should perform in the future. And with regards to like balancing everything, obviously that was difficult. But again, when you make something a priority, you can make it happen. And the early mornings that's a massive thing for me, getting up and doing stuff when there's time, when no one else is around. And that's when I did a lot of writing. That's pretty much when I wrote most of my book, was at like 6 a.m, 5 a.m.
That was one of your challenges, right? Like to get up 2 hours earlier than you needed to. For how long did you do that?
That's now my lifestyle. I just do it all the time. I just get up early. And that can be an easy challenge if you do it for one day. I mean, say easy, when the alarm goes off at 4 a.m, and that's not easy. You're tired. You don't want to get out of bed. But one day, most people can do that. If you're going on holiday, you'll get up 2 hours earlier, no problem. But it's consistently doing it. It goes from an easy challenge to a kind of an epic challenge. It's like a daily practice.
Ben, what has stuck? So I know when Dominic and I have done these 30-day challenges, sometimes these things stick, sometimes a version of them stick, and sometimes they go away completely. And I'm curious, you did 43 of these things in a year. What is sticking? And you said getting up early is now part of your lifestyle. It's part of your human operations. And so what is stuck for you?
So that's another good question. I think for me, getting up early, cold showers, the consistency with pushing myself with the cold, physical challenges. I'm a runner. I love running long distances now. I didn't before, but this was part of the whole thing. So running has really stuck, and I push myself with that. But actually just physically, just trying different things. And I climb as well. So climbing, that's something that I commit to. And the Japanese I commit to, and meditation. These are things that have really stuck with me. But some of the challenges have been like, why not? You do it and then it's done. Some of them are obviously ongoing. Skills are very, very difficult categories because you can learn something, right? You can learn to juggle, which was one of the things. Like, okay, I teach myself to juggle so that, again, I can practice this growth mindset, dealing with failure. It's a nice skill. It's, another sort of challenge. And once you've learned to juggle 3 balls, you can obviously take it further. You can juggle 4, 5, 7, whatever. So there is no real end. You can just go all the way up to, being absolutely insane at juggling. But for me, it was just about being a beginner, really, and just getting a little bit of a skill for some of these things. And there's a lot of value in that, I think. Being a beginner can be a lot of fun because you're learning. It's hard when you're a beginner. Getting
up early, running, climbing a mountain, it seems like you live a very interesting life now. How was your life before this? Was it as interesting? How do you feel about living now?
I think compared to when I was in the peak of my anxiety, life was very black and white, very restrictive, right? Didn't want to go out, didn't want to do things. Actually, at one point, I didn't even want to go to the park right next to my house. Didn't even want to walk to the bench. So close, like 100 meters from my house. That felt overwhelming, right? So that's a very restrictive place to be. So now life is very different. It's very colourful. And I've got a lot more hobbies and interesting experiences. And so this whole kind of journey has been amazing for me. I've really enjoyed doing this, although it hasn't been easy.
When I went through your 43 challenges, I looked at a few of them. I said, oh, I know what he did. I know how he decided on what to do. He looked at James Bond and said, what would James Bond do? Because you had language, right? Lockpicking, driving skills, summon adrenaline was one of your challenges. I was like, this guy's James Bond now. This is amazing.
Jason Bourne, kind of, yeah.
Jason Bourne, yes.
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of adventurous, but then naturally there's a whole kind of host of challenge that goes with that. The summon adrenaline one is good because that can be done in many different ways. How do you get adrenaline in your body? Loads of different things you can do. And in the book, I talk about some climbing experiences that I had that, helped me to do that. And so that's interesting. I talk about there's a style of climbing called deep water soloing, where you climb above water. And if you fall off the rock, you don't have any ropes or anything. So if you fall off, you fall into the water. And that's pretty scary, I'll be honest. So that's an amazing way to, because I'm a climber as well, that's kind of naturally part of it. But when you're there, meters above the sea and you can hear it underneath you, that is scary. That's intense. It's an intense moment, but brilliant. Like, I'll never forget that. And I've done that quite a bit now. I've done quite a bit of deep water soloing. So yeah, it's a good way to get your heart racing.
So Ben, as we're winding down the conversation, I want to do some quick hit questions. One of the biggest ones that were on Brian in my mind was, how had the year of adversity prepared you for what you're experiencing now in the coronavirus era? How would the former Ben, who was living the black and white, anxious life, have experienced this period of time, and how is this Ben experiencing it?
Oh, yeah, that's another great question. I think that would have been, it would have been really, really hard. I wouldn't have had any tools or any way of dealing with, the kind of the mental side of it. I wouldn't have understood what was happening within my mind. So actually having systems that I can use, kind of leaning into my philosophy that I've resonated with. Obviously, everyone's different. They'll have different systems that they use. For me, Stoicism, growth mindset, Buddhism, a lot of the things I write about, and they're actually really important to me. I lean into them more when things are difficult or when you're experiencing uncertainty. And if you have a system in place, it will help you to deal with things. Ultimately, you're trying to deal with the chaos of life. So if you have a system in place, if you know what works for you, I think the only way to find that is through trial and error. And that's what this whole project is about, just finding what worked for me and exploring it, all these different ideas. So having ideas that I can lean on when things are difficult has been so valuable. And that's been the big take home from this whole project, really.
Amazing. What have you been doing since you wrote the book? Because the 43 challenges that are in there, you've probably grown upon. So what's on tap for Ben now? What's on tap for Ben in the future?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, the list is endless, really. It's a lifestyle now. I continually seek out challenges and seek out things that I can do to grow. Obviously, we're living in a slightly interesting time at the moment with lockdown, and in the UK, we can go out to exercise, but we are encouraged to stay in, and there is, big lockdown. You have to find challenges and seek things out in different ways at the moment. So the other week, I climbed Mount Everest on my stairs.
How does that work?
So the height of Everest is 8,848 meters. So I did some maths and calculated that I would need to go up and down my stairs 2,137 times to complete the height of Everest. So it took me 8 days. I divided it up, and every day I went and did like 3 hours on the stairs. And my girlfriend sat at the table working, and I'm going up and down the stairs next to her. It's quite a bizarre experience, but it was brilliant. Had some hilarious comments on Instagram as well when I posted some pictures. I actually got some, I was offered Sherpa support from an Everest expedition company.
It's great.
It's really funny. Loads of people, chiming in about the Hillary Steph and offering loads of advice. So it was nice actually to see that challenge evolve over, a few days, and posting some pictures. Because I'm a climber, I do a lot of mountaineering. I've got all the mountaineering kit. So for the summit photo, I kind of roped up and just, had a bit of a laugh, and it was fun. That was a good lockdown challenge. I ran a marathon in my garden the other day as well. I've got a really small garden. That's the catch.
I like how Ben says that, it's no big deal. I ran a marathon in my garden.
Right.
I think you've done a lot of challenges. That's not a big deal.
Right.
This is really hard. And my garden's it's like 8 meters long.
Yeah, that's what I didn't think it was a half mile long, and that's why this is so wild.
It's like I had to do 4,802 lengths of my garden to cover the distance.
Did you do that all at once?
Yeah, it was all just back and forth all day.
Do people look at you like you're like when you do some of these challenges? I mean, whether it's the hat or running back and forth in your garden, does your girlfriend or anybody look at you like, "What are you doing?"
Well, she's used to it now. She's acclimatized. Yeah, the neighbours think I'm absolutely insane. Their kids, it was quite funny. They made me some signs and they were holding it over the fence. Keep going. You're nearly done.
You got this. Only 3,000 more turns.
Yeah, exactly.
Ben, how would you, if a guy wanted to jump on to what you're doing, what advice would you give them on how to get started?
Okay, so I think the thing I was saying earlier about the bucket list and anti-bucket list, that's a great place to start. Start listing things you want to do that you haven't got around to doing that are challenging. And also look at things that you don't want to do. Look at your fears. Look at things that you can expand and turn into challenges. Start building that list. Let your mind create these things, and just you have to go with what's going to push you. We're all different. In my book, I talk about my experiences and give some examples of things that I've been doing to kind of hope, that will inspire people to find their own challenges. We're all different. We all need different types of things to learn and grow from. So I think that's it. Just start writing down ideas and just start doing them. Start small, and these ideas compound. As soon as you've done a couple, you get that feedback and you get that boost of confidence, and you see that your life is changing. Then, it snowballs. You just start with one small, simple challenge. I'd like to encourage people. I'll give you two to start. That's very, very easy that you can do right now. So number one, take a cold shower, entirely cold.
Oh, God, of course you would say that. All right.
Cold shower. The second thing is go and eat something absolutely disgusting.
Oh, yeah. Saw you did this, man. Oysters was number one on your list. I hate oysters. The consistency of them nauseate me. Why is this the number two that you suggest?
Well, because this is easy. Everyone can relate to it. You just find something disgusting that you really don't want to eat, and then it's mind over matter. You're just having to force yourself to do it. And you just look at what your mind is doing when you're forcing yourself to eat something disgusting. It's very easy to do, but you can have a lot of fun, right? You can experiment. And when you've got other people involved as well, this has become like a Boxing Day tradition now.
Those are two really big things, Ben. And Dominic, you talked about this with the 100 push-up challenge. But one is, like, when we're doing these challenges, my mind went to, like, I'm going to go eat bugs. And then I'm going to be done eating bugs, and then I'm done. But I love what you said. Watch what your mind is doing while you're doing this. That by itself makes it more exciting. And then the second thing you said was, what happens when you do it with other people? And bringing in community and doing it together, it feels now like a less of a, like, go do something weird by yourself and finish it, and more like let's see what my mind does, and, like, let's do this with other people. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's so much fun with other people. It's now become a Boxing Day tradition, actually, in my house. I'll bring weird things. Every Christmas, I bring weird stuff for Boxing Day. And that will range from insects to, like, just weird things that no one has ever heard of before. And then it's so much fun watching other people do it. And there's that kind of, it's a brilliant experience. I recommend it, and that will obviously cover all different diets as well. If you're vegan, there's still disgusting things you can eat.
Have you gotten into the cricket powder yet? I hear cricket powder is the new protein powder.
I haven't. I've eaten crickets though.
Okay.
Salt and vinegar.
Of course you have. You know what, Ben? There's a lot of things that you said here that really resonated, but this concept of how your life went from black and white to something far more colorful. How it went from just like even being afraid to walk down the street to go to your park to now eating crickets and rock climbing and speaking Japanese and learning how to juggle and picking locks and doing James Bond or Jason Bourne type stuff. That not only makes you more interesting to yourself, I think it brings inspiration and joy to other people's lives as well, just like by showing up as yourself. What I would love to do is just leave our listeners with this call to action, which is to take one of these challenges, like one of the two that you've laid down, which is the cold shower or eating something disgusting and watching your mind as you're doing it, and to buy your book, which is called How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable. Where can they buy that, Ben?
So you can get the book on Amazon. You can get it at most bookstores. You'll be able to pre-order. It comes out in June 9th. So everything's pre-order at the moment, but then you can get it online or in bookstores all over the place. And there'll be an Audible version as well that's coming out.
Beautiful, man. And are you going to be doing a speaking tour in the United States? You going to come to New York?
I'd love to. I'm actually doing in a couple of weeks, I've got a workshop, an online workshop, because obviously the environment at the moment is demanding creativity in the way that we do things. So actually I was booked to do this gig in Kensington Olympia, and it's changed, and the festival is now online, which is amazing because all of these speakers can actually go and still do these workshops. So that's coming up. If you go to mindbodyspirit.co.uk, you'll find that there's the workshop that I'm doing. It's called How to Be Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable, and that's an exploration of some of the things we've talked about today and kind of how do you find your own challenges. So it's kind of really leaning into that. So yeah, that's the next live event. And then, yeah, we'll see. I'd love to, come and do some stuff in the States. It'd be amazing.
I'm going to link your Mind, Body, Spirit presentation. And we would love, if you come to New York, we'll set something up. We'll get some guys together. And I think there's an opportunity for that to happen. And I think the last thing is you have an Instagram account that has a lot of this stuff for daily inspiration. Is it called How to Challenge Yourself?
It's called Do Things That Challenge You.
Do things that challenge you.
And that's very visual. And there's you can see pictures of things I've been doing. There's a lot of philosophy there, quotes and things that, so it's kind of a mix. But yeah, you can get a sense of what I've been doing with that. There's also my website with a blog, benaldridge.com. So that's an active blog. So I write about what I've been doing, and there's loads more pictures and stuff on mental health there as well. So that's another good place to visit.
Excellent. Going to link all that in the show notes. Ben, brother, thanks for being such an inspiration, man, for sharing your story. Can't wait to keep following you because it sounds like these things are going to get even increasingly more interesting. So I'm already following you on Instagram. Your book is pre-ordered. Thanks for sharing your time and your wisdom with us, man.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And it's been so brilliant chatting to you guys. It's so much fun. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, if you were lit up and inspired by this interview with Ben, would you please consider leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts pointing to this particular episode? Every time you do something like that, it helps a potential future listener, a man who is seeking to get on that inner path to find his fullest potential. That gives him the confidence that this is the episode for him to listen to, and you may very well be changing a life by the simple act of leaving a review and pointing to this episode and letting others know what it inspired in you. Thank you.